Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading property experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, and Ben Kingsley, Chair of Property Investment Professionals of Australia, and the 2014 and 2015 Property Investment Advisor of the Year.
All right, folks, you're on the Property Couch, where each week Ben and I bring you the insider's guide to property investing. Welcome back to the couch, mate.
G'day, mate. Good to see you.
Are you well rested after Facebook Live?
I am. It was a big day that day. Lots on. I had to get through it. I mentioned that on the show, but so basically all good. Great questions.
They were great questions. So if anyone's interested in finding out, if you didn't make that, what we did is we went through the frameworks in the book and we took some Q&A. So really good resource. So if you want to have a look at that, go to our Facebook page. Like us while you're there, and you'll be able to see a replay and check it out, Ben, when you're in the freedom of your own time, sitting back, relaxing. You can check that out. And also just a reminder that the PPOR sentiment survey was out last week.
Yes, it was.
So if anyone doesn't...
Look, some people might want to look at the numbers in terms of what the market's saying. I mean, it's an interesting survey. It's it's one of those sort of surveys where we are talking to more sophisticated investors than non-sophisticated, as I mentioned before. So ultimately, take a look at it. And some people might be interested in that stuff. Other people might say it doesn't give predictions of suburbs. I think we need to highlight that. It's just basically it's investors being surveyed in terms of why they invest in property and why they don't invest in property and who they use. And obviously, it highlights the fact that you need to use a professional. So that's always good.
Very good. All right.
What's been happening in your neck of the woods, mate?
Mate, I've just been
busy out in the field
today. Been in the field, buying properties. It's an interesting time at the moment, mate. Money's cheap.
Yeah, money's cheap.
Money's cheap.
Sentiment interest is high. Auction clearance rates are high. It's tough out there.
It is tough out there.
It is tough out there.
Mate, it just goes to show that the enormous confidence that people have in bricks and mortar in this country.
Yep.
When all else fails, it's a flight to bricks and mortar, and I don't think that's a bad thing.
It is. So let's teach people how to invest in it, shall we?
Oh, well, mate, maybe even 81 episodes we might have been doing that. So, episode number 82. Favourite time of the month, Ivis, for us, Q&A. Q&A. So, mate, we're going to try and rip through a few. We've got a few short ones, which no doubt the way we answer them, it'll still be long.
It's still going to take us 30 minutes to answer
So in theory, we've lined up a few here that we'll try and get through quickly. So I'll kick it off. Here we go.
Oh, should I kick it off?
No, you kick it off.
All right, I'll kick it off because I've got three in front of me and you've got two.
Should I kick it off or you kick it off?
All right, Mark McNamara. Is it better to keep a great tenant on a lower rental than push for a great rental return and gamble with quality of the new tenant and subsequent vacancies in between? Bryce.
Mark, what a great question. To me, that really comes down to how confident you are as a property investor. So if you've got a few, you won't lose your nerve with a vacancy. And if the market suggests that you can get a little bit more, it's a numbers game, so we should. But there's a few caveats. One, don't do it in the middle of winter. And make sure you're in a position of strength. So I've seen a scenario. A client told me that they had a tenant who was in there for 9 years, paying $420 a week rent for a property, and then the property manager, who should have known better, through winter suggested they could get some more. And so they put the rent up, and I'm thinking, gee whiz, you should have had a quick chat to me because I would have given you advice to sit tight. And then the long story short, the 9-year tenant was miffed, moved out, and then had to end up re-letting the property for $400 a week. So
not cool.
You've got to know your market.
You've got to know your market. You've got to know your tenant. So here's another example. I had one where I think it was 8 years and they hadn't adjusted the rent at all. Right. So, and the reality was that they could have got an extra $100 a week in the rent. All right, because
let me guess, it was self-managed.
No, it wasn't self-managed. It wasn't self. But the vendor, the landlord, basically said, I'm happy for them to be in there, and they're looking after it really nicely. So, and they didn't see it as a business. So they just felt like, I don't want to, I know their backstory, young single mum with daughter, so didn't want to move it. So you do get these situations when you're a landlord where you maybe get a chance to talk to the tenant and you get to form a bit of a relationship. In some cases, you want to sort of potentially avoid that, because this is a business transaction. So the reality is in answering this question, I reckon it's case by case.
Oh,
For
totally.
me, the first thing I would always say is I would love to keep a good tenant in the property.
Yep.
Always love to keep a good tenant, but not at the sacrifice of $30 or $40 or $50 a week, because that's obviously money that I've forecast to help pay down the loan and then the passive income that I'm going to live on. You know, I'm not running a charity, but I am certainly want to provide nice accommodation for the tenants that live in my properties. So that's number one. So my default is I'll always keep a good tenant. But my other position is I would absolutely have a detailed conversation with my property manager to sort of say, how's the market out there? In fact, one of my properties in Melbourne is just been told that my tenants are moving to New York, so he's got a transfer, so I've got a property coming up. Now, she said, look, I think we keep the rent at the current market value, and these are the reasons why. She backed it up with logic. I then did a quick search just to validate her position, and I could have gone a little bit more aggressive and asked for a little bit more, but the reality is she's a specialist in that market. She knows what's going on at the moment and the timing of the market, and I don't want to see my property vacant for 10 weeks, 12 weeks, just to chase an extra 20 or 30 bucks a week. So that's a point.
Very good point, Ben. Make no mistake, listeners, the biggest expense, bar none, that you will ever have as a property investor is a vacancy. So there's no one-size-fits-all answer to that. It comes down to incremental creeps, incremental creeping up of the rent. It comes down to what your debt is on the property and whether you need to put up the rent large or small.
Yep.
And it also comes down to the time of the year.
It's a supply-demand story. So case by case.
But treasure the good tenants that have been there for a long time who are looking after your asset, because a vacancy is going to really unpack some anxiety for you. So
many years ago, I actually used to say the week before Christmas I wouldn't charge them rent.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you do that now?
No, but I did.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but a couple of the properties that I owned early on, I just thought, they've been good tenants.
That's brilliant.
And just, for getting the Christmas spirit, I used to basically just say no more, just this week. But then with your property managers and the way they run their books and all that.
They don't like it because they
don't like it. They got to.
Because I've actually done it too, and they go, oh, and there's silence. It's like, shouldn't you be clapping for
But
this?
it's also the administrative work. They've got to go into the system and take that 1 week out and then adjust for it. And so it's like, it just got a bit too hard. So, So normally now when I do an annual review or whatever, I just drive to the hardware store and I might buy some insect bombs or some types of things that are handy around the house, mouse traps and all that. I just a whole big bag of 40, 50 bucks worth of stuff and just basically bring it in and say, there you go, guys.
Aren't you the modern day Father Christmas?
It's all about looking after your business.
Mate,
and if your tenants are your business.
Mate, I like to heckle you anyway, but that's a very, very good thing that you do, mate. So well done. Good question. Tom has written into us. Hi, I would like to hear more about exit strategies when time is not on my side. I've just turned 50 with my youngest child in year 12 and eldest living in the eastern states. My PPR is paid off, value of 1.1 million, and I have 2 investment properties with a combined value of 1 million, but an investment loan of 1.2 million. The reason for the negative equity is that I have been capitalising the investment interest whilst I directed all rental income into paying off my PPR, principal place of residence. So now I need to know what is next. My goal is to retire or work reduced hours in an anonymous corporate role by age 55. I am presently in a well-paid job paying about $220,000 and have about $270,000 in super, which I'm contributing up to the max $35K per annum. I can't get my headspace around what to do next. Any suggestions from the 2014 and 2015 property investment
no pressure
would be appreciated. I ad-libbed a little bit.
You did have ad-lib there? Right out. Can I have a look at that?
Yes.
All right, so here we go. I'm going to unpack this one. Right?
Unpack away, man.
Here we go. Okay, so there's a few things that I still don't know, okay? And they're really important things that I need to know. The first thing that I need to know is, okay, you're on a high income, 220, that's terrific, but what is your surplus income? You cannot build wealth without surplus income. I've got to spend money to make money. And so you know our ABCD, basically we're talking about cash flow management and borrowing power. So they are 2 very, very big things. You're currently negatively geared. I understand that. You also tell me that your daughter Your youngest daughter is in year 12, so I suspect your cash flow is going to improve even further. So if I've got really strong surpluses, then that's going to be a big deciding factor in the types of assets that I buy. The higher the surplus, the more growth I chase. I'll repeat that again. The higher the surplus, the more growth I chase, and the less I'm concerned about the income side or the yielding side of the story, okay, from the property. All right.
Key point there, folks, because Ben's not interested in positive cash flow, negative cash flow. It's case by case. So the more cash flow, the more he chases growth.
So there's a couple of things in there. The super seems a bit low for the income you're earning. You may have lived overseas for a while, and that probably is the reason why. So I probably want a little bit of backstory on that. In terms of the other big moving piece of the missing puzzle here is what's your end game? What's your target? What are you trying to achieve? And if the concept is as best as I can get it, that's not investing. You know, we don't go into business saying, I just want to build a business as big as I can build it. You want to basically have a better business plan than that, because that type of broad view is going to limit you in terms of decision making. But
lots of people have that, don't they, Ben?
Oh, they do. That's the biggest problem. Yeah. You know, like they just default. I just want the best returns, and of course,
I want to be wealthy. I want to be rich, but it needs to be better defined.
Correct. So define the target. So if we're saying we want to retire at 55 or take less responsibility, non-corporate, love it. So a bit of maybe giving back for Tom. Good on you, Tom. But the question then is, okay, well, what income do you have? So the reality could be for you, Tom, if we just focused on paying that 1.2 down and we've got the $1 million portfolio and that's yielding 5%, well, there's your 50 grand a year. Supplement that with your 270 and super plus, you're making additional contributions at 35. That's going to obviously fast track or build that up a little bit, compound that at 6% per annum over the next 5 years. We'll see where that looks. And then we work out what cash flow you need. Because there is going to be a cash flow challenge between age 55 and 60 when you can access that super. Because that super could be part of the debt pay down strategy that we also look to implement for you. So there are a few moving parts here that we don't know the story on. The reality is if we're still in accumulation phase and I've got really strong surpluses and those surpluses are only going to last for a short period of time, I've got to be mindful of that. So I might go for a balanced asset where I've got a bit of growth and yield happening at the same time. Or if it's, no, I'm really chasing a bigger number and I want to pay debt down and I want to turn that income off at 55, then I'm probably going to have a yield play. I'm going to buy a couple little cash cows, no vacancies, those types of properties that I'll be looking at as well. So it really does come down to understanding a few more of those principles. And this is why it is hard for Tom, because he's probably sat down and he's worked out, there's tax implications here. There's, my income's going to fluctuate a bit. I might have renovations that I need to do on that family home. Congratulations for paying off your principal place of residence.
Yeah.
But in reality, I would have argued if I had met you 10 years earlier to slow paying that down to control the bigger asset base. And that's, a lead into one of the other questions that we might tackle today.
Yeah, very good. So, mate, that's good advice. So, Tom, if you get a chance to maybe give us a little bit more detail, we might be able to help you. But I guess it really comes down to defining your target, which is good. So hopefully that helped. I think it's you now, mate.
Oh, me again?
Yeah.
Okay. Sean Steele. G'day, Sean. A client of ours, I believe. Hi, guys. Would be great to hear your thoughts in a podcast about property overseas as part of a portfolio, particular New Zealand.
New Zealand. Is that your sign off?
Chibro. What's the Kia ora, bro? No, that's hello, isn't it? Kia ora, bro?
Do you want to hear my New Zealand gag?
Yeah, I've heard it before. Go again.
What does a hen do? Lays eggs, bro.
Now, he's the only
You'll get that on the way home, folks.
What does a hen do? Oh, that's right. What does a hen do? Right, got it. Okay. There's some wave
I don't know where
rider.
that came from. Mate, I'm only warming up.
There's some wave rider type activity gaining momentum around Auckland, which has become a heated market, it seems. So wave rider strategy, if you haven't read the book, a wave rider strategy is a strategy whereby you are gaining the gentrification of the main area, and that's flowing out to the next suburb that's offered the lifestyle drivers, the human interest behaviours, the character homes, all of those types of things. So that's the wave rider strategy. And Auckland, we talk about the Australian market going solly. Mate, the New Zealand market is gone spastic. It's gone crazy.
Right.
Oh, it's unbelievable over there. I didn't get that unbelievable right.
Well, I was going to say, if you're going to write into us, write to Ben directly.
Sorry, if
complain about the accent.
Russian chops. So yes, that's the challenge. So interesting enough, I was reading an article on. They think the NZ dollar is going to reach parity with the Aussie. Yeah. So because of the property market and potentially the fact that the governor over there is probably going to have to raise interest rates, which means that their cash becomes attractive to park other money to buy their income because of the returns on their cash, because they're one of the only developed economies that are basically looking to raise interest rates in the near future because the economy is going so well and the property market's overheated. So
Great.
let's talk about overseas property.
Yeah, look, it's a good question, Sean. I actually caught up with Sean 2 weeks ago, so I should have spoke to him directly about this, but it's for the benefit of the listeners. Hey, the good thing about the principles that we've talked about for the last 81 episodes, Ben, is it doesn't matter where you are. So it's not like it's a concept that says it only works in regional, or it only works in capital cities, or it only works in Australia, or it only works in Tasmania. Because if you apply the principles of human interest, human behaviour and economic activity to any marketplace in the world, they still exist. So my answer to Sean is, I know that Sean lives in Brisbane.
Yep.
If you have suitable experience and you have suitable number of properties in your portfolio, that means that you can start to look outside your own comfort zone or your own sort of domestic market, then you would consider it. So if someone is in New Zealand and they're listening to this podcast and they were reading our book, I'd say absolutely go for it. And put the principles in place to make sure that you're getting the right demographic, the right income profile, because the principles still apply. So my answer to that is yes, consider it if you have got enough in your portfolio already, if you're in Australia, or if you're in New Zealand, go for it. But apply the principles equally, whichever market you're in.
I agree. You've heard us talk about, so if you're listening in the US, you can listen to all these podcasts because they will ring true. You can listen in the UK, you can listen in Singapore, in Hong Kong, Japan, China, wherever. The principles... Perth, yeah, that's almost like on the other side of the world. So the principles are consistent around understanding what the buyer interest is all about. So in Hong Kong, Shanghai, Beijing, the buyer interest is about unit living, close to working nodes, and obviously in Hong Kong, well, you're an island, so it's very tightly held. That's where the scarcity comes into it, and obviously it's a finance hub. In New Zealand,
New York,
yeah, and New York and so forth. So, we're not going to be able to buy a freestanding house in downtown Manhattan, on Manhattan Island. It's not going to happen. So we've got to sort of say, well, where's the market at? So the better part about understanding those unit markets is you can work out the per square metre, and you can work out it's a lot easier to value properties in high-rise apartments than what it is to value freestanding homes on different streets.
Tell me about it. I watch those American real estate shows, and they just walk in and say per square foot comp's done, whereas it's not as easy.
A lot more difficult. And then the other thing is you need to understand the rules and regulations around your market. So as an example, did you know in New Zealand you don't pay capital gains tax? So there's no capital gains tax on investment properties.
And depreciation, there's none.
I don't think you can depreciate it, but there's the negative gearing is a little bit different there as well. So the reality is that's what you've got to understand. So before you then gung-ho and put our principles into other markets, there are different tax regimes, both local, so in other words, state-based taxes, certainly in the states that you need to be familiar with, and you also need to be familiar with the federal legislation around the country in which you're also looking to invest. Because look, Spain, Portugal at the moment, some pretty sensational buying opportunities, 25% unemployment, youth unemployment over there. I mean, if they were on our doorstep, do you think I wouldn't have convinced myself that a little small investment in one of those sort of provincial areas of Spain wouldn't go? It would certainly fit into my portfolio. But that's that's me going against the investment grade versus the living and lifestyle choice. But that's the type of opportunities you've got to look at there. So the principles work: supply, demand, oversupply of apartments. Got to be careful of that. That's what happened in Spain. Building booms in Spain and Portugal. But these principles do apply Ireland. They're applying over there. All of those great markets. So if you're listening internationally, shout out to you.
Yeah, absolutely. But Sean, you're going to have some exchange rate sort of
Good
complexities that come into it.
Yes.
And so ultimately, if you think about it, Ben, we help clients pay off their principal place of residence and buy 3 to 5 investment properties typically.
Yes.
So if we go back to what's the end game, reverse engineer it, if you can do it domestically here, you don't need to chase the international markets. We're not saying don't do it, but for the majority of people, there's no need.
Well, I think, let's talk about the US market there. There was an amazing opportunity back post GFC in the US market. And I think a lot of people said, did you go and have a look at it? I said, I absolutely did. I ran the ruler over it a couple of times. And what I also found out in that market, that there's no regulation around property management. So I'm here in an island, in the southern hemisphere, and I've got to basically get on a plane and go and look after someone who's not paying their rent. So now that is getting better in terms of some of the infrastructure around property management, and I think that will change that marketplace over there. But right now, I thought for the risk reward and for the problem that I was solving, was I happy about the return I was going to get? So I looked at alternatives, and in fact, I did do some investing in America through a property trust, where I bought into the property trust, and the property trust bought a series of properties over there, and they were all managed and it was all taken care of. So I did put some of my self-managed super into an investment trust that owns many, many properties over there, and that's done well for me. So that's how I got into that market. So I still passive investment, but because I wasn't a topic expert in that area, I said, rightio, I think I can make better returns in Australia. And I've also, taken that approach for the clients we look after.
Hopefully that's helped, Sean. Thanks for your question. I've got one here, Ben, from Anonymous. And the reason it's anonymous is because he goes through quite a lengthy, and I'll paraphrase some of it. But ultimately, we get the question a lot where people listen to our podcast and they say, how do we do what you actually do? So it's, hi, Ben and Bryce. Firstly, I'd say you guys do an awesome job of the podcast. I've been listening to the start and was born and bred in Victoria, now living in New South Wales. So I love the footy talk. And to put that in, because not everyone loves the footy talk.
Well, we haven't talked about the footy. No. The finals are getting close now.
Yeah, exactly. But that's normally people put it on 15 seconds fast forward at the beginning, so they don't have to listen to us rabbit on. I'd like to congratulate you on the book, handing out to numerous friends. It's gold, not knowing which direction to go. So a bit of background on myself. I've been listening to your podcast, and I now believe I've found the foundations for property investing going forward with the right team around me, in brackets, coach, broker, accountant, solicitor and acquisitions team, which is fantastic. We moved to the Hunter Valley to give us more choices. I'm currently on a high income of $140,000 as a coal miner, but to be honest, my heart isn't in it anymore, and I don't enjoy my work, in brackets, except the pay each fortnight. The reason for reaching out to you guys is currently have a 3-year plan. They want to move back to Melbourne, they want to move back to Geelong, they want a few investment properties. He says, by the end of 2016, my goal is to complete a diploma of finance and mortgage broking management, because I believe everything revolves around finance, which we agree, and creating wealth through property. I'm also working towards 1 to 2 weeks work experience with my property acquisitions team to see how everything operates on the ground. My question to you guys is, what else do you recommend I do over the next few years in preparation to help transition into the property investment line of work? The reason I thought this would be good, Ben, is although it's specific to Anonymous, we do get a lot of people asking. So it's good probably to give people an insight, because there are people who are really passionate about property, really passionate about helping other people, really passionate about investing in property and what the path actually looks like.
Yeah, I mean, just on that point, we're actually looking to employ someone in our mortgage team, not as a mortgage broker, but basically as someone who supports the mortgage broker, so loan administration. So if you want to know the ins and outs, if you're a great administrator, attention to detail person, and friendly and sociable, then we want to hear from you, because we'll always, even if you've got no experience, we'll always hire for attitude, train for skill. So just a little shout out.
But no Collingwood supporters need apply.
Yeah, no, we don't talk about our company very much, but Empower Wealth / jobs or employment, just search our website for that stuff. I was just pointing at me going,
no Collingwood supporters need apply.
See, I just completely disregarded that and just kept moving forward. So coming back to that point. So a couple of little tips for Anonymous. First and foremost, before you decide to leave your employment, get your war chest out into lines of credit or equity facilities whilst you're on the higher income. Because I'll use my example with my beautiful wife and I. When we moved back to Melbourne to start up our business down here, I was in a corporate job in tourism. I basically released all the equity in my properties, and we had them sitting there as buffers. And that just gave me the confidence to know that I was going to spend some time in learning my craft, many years ago, and giving me a chance to build up my business. So that was always the important point, because one of the big things about people who want to invest in property, they go bang, bang, and then they buy too quickly, and then they've got their gearing ratios really high, and then they say, oh, but I hate my job now. And then all of a sudden I'm going to be down on an $80,000 income as opposed to a $140,000 income. And they have to sell one of their properties and they take a cut or loss for that. It's just no. So plan to become what you plan to become. Forward think. Don't just do short term, do longer term. So when you're doing that, effectively you get yourself into a situation where you can line up the ducks correctly. How did I do it? So just a little quick background for me. So I did the same thing. I basically said, all right, I need to learn about this finance game. So I went and did my certificate 3 at the time, which is now, I've upgraded that to a diploma level. And so with the diploma, I've now got a diploma of finance broking, or whatever the technical terminology is. And then whilst I was doing that, I also said, well, I want to do this for property investment. I always had a very clear vision of helping Australians invest in property. So I had a great amount of knowledge. I'd been investing in property from the age of 23, but I didn't have any qualification in behind me. So off my own volition, I basically went and looked around for different courses, and I chose to do the PPOR course. So as a qualified property investment advisor. So part-time, over 2.5 years. It was then run by Deakin Prime University, so Deakin University, called Deakin Prime, and I had the distant learning. So basically got the manuals, did my assignments, did my exams, and did the 6 modules to get my qualification over a 2.5 year period. So not only did I have the experience behind me in terms of my practical experience, I also had a formal qualification in behind the work that I did. And then from 2007, I started to do more and more property investment advice, and fast track to where I am now. I'm the chairman of the association of PPOR, and I strongly believe it's a good entry level course for those people who want to get in. And what I'm really pleased about now, as an example, we've just hired 2 new people in our business, and one of them's a QPIA. So businesses like ours, which are growing, are looking for this qualification now. I'm looking for people who have a passion for it, but potentially have also gone and got their qualification. And there will be other businesses out there over time, like ours, who'll be looking to have property investment advisors in their business, and they'll be looking at that and saying, well, he's qualified.
Well, that's because a lot of investment advice is just back of napkin stuff. So at least the qualified property investment advisor badge means that you've gone through a process to know your client, tailor it specifically to them, and not provide a vanilla solution. So that's a good thing too. So for me, I'm a degree qualified accountant. That doesn't necessarily act as a prerequisite other than a big picture of understanding numbers. I've got a diploma in financial services, which is the financial planning qualification. I'm 1 unit off QPIA, Ben.
Well, let's hope we get that done.
So that'll be done very, very shortly.
Well, what does that also tell you? That you're continually learning. Same for me. I mean, I think it was 2011 that I got my real estate agent license. So we're forever also learning to be better at what we can be. And, we study podcasts, and we're about improving ourselves and being the best version of who we can be. And that's no different. We want everyone to have a good level of knowledge so they don't make silly mistakes.
That's an important point, Ben, because we often, we're counsellors in part because people are often asking for an opinion about the headline, and you've got to be able to see the bigger picture and rise above that. So if you can imagine 2 circles, I've said this before on the podcast, but if you can imagine 2 circles where the left circle is all about the technical or the research and the understanding, and the right circle is all about actually doing it, walking the talk. If you can actually merge those 2 circles, and where they overlap, that's the sweet spot, because that's the sweet spot that you and I are in. We're both property investors, so we've done the doing, and we're also continually, daily, and we'll continue to do that forever and a day, fine-tuning our technical understanding. So we've actually merged the 2, and that's that sweet spot in the middle. So I guess that's for Anonymous. We get that a lot. I would also say if they don't live, Ben, if they're looking to change careers into the property advisory space, it's difficult if you're not in one of the big cities, to be honest, because if you live in a regional town or where you're going to get that experience, where you're going to get that impact, where you're going to get the clients is going to be tough. So, we had someone, I remember you and I were in Adelaide, I think someone rang, we had them on speaker and they were chatting and they were in a...
we're in Canberra.
Canberra, and they were in Adelaide.
They ran from Adelaide, yep.
So they were asking the question. So not to say that it can't be done in any market, but obviously if you're if you're wanting to learn the craft from a new career, you're obviously going to need to lean on someone and go under their wing, and it makes it more difficult the further away from a major market that you're
I agree, and I think part of the legacy we want to leave is we want to create an accepted level of professionalism. So PIP is all about building out the property investment industry and getting the professional people and separating them from the spruikers, so you know that there is professional advice you can go and see. And you want that advice to be well-rounded. You want it to be tailored to your circumstances. You mentioned it earlier in the podcast around, notice how I was looking at the personal circumstances, and I was saying, well, the way I would go is going to be determined by your particular story, not necessarily by the 5 plans that I've done this week, in terms of what that looks like. So it's absolutely true in regards to what it looks like. So thank you very much for that question, Anonymous. I think it's good for some people have an interest in this field, and we want more great people working in the property investment industry.
Absolutely.
All right, so I've got another question here from Ian Northeast. Thanks for the question, Ian. Good afternoon, gents. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. I'm 40 of 67 episodes in, so this question came through in June, because obviously we're at episode 82. And still loving the insights. A question for your podcast. Getting rid of debt first versus investing first. We love this one. This one is fun. As a health practitioner with approximately 5K of discretionary income, so he's told me his surplus income. I like that, so I know that's a month. Would you recommend chipping away at approximately 35,000 of bad debt? Well, Ian, come on, what's happened there? So I want to unpack that story around how do you get to 35,000 in credit card debt? Did you have a honeymoon? Did you recently get married? Did you go and spend some? Or did you invest that into renovations on the property? Not quite sure. We'd need to understand about that. In bad debt, mix between high and low interest accounts and seeking professional aid such as yours to become a first-time rent investor, or seeking your assistance in an attempt to send that bad debt into some sort of mortgage. Love your work and your banter. Ian,
good question. So there is a bit going on there, Ian, but I think it really comes down to a couple of things. But if the time it's taking for you to reduce that bad debt could mean that the market's moved against you, depending on which market you're in. So I'm of the view, depending on your surplus, depending on your own circumstances, because you've asked if you can refinance that debt into a mortgage. Well, if you've got the equity, you could. But generally speaking, without knowing your circumstances, you'd want to leverage into real estate sooner rather than later. So if that extra surplus meant that you could control a larger asset and get the return on that while still diligently chipping away at that bad debt, that would be my first port of call, and that would be my first strategy, going without understanding the circumstances. Because it's, remember the old cash flow quadrant game with Robert Kiyosaki? He actually teaches that principle within the board game. It doesn't matter if you're a janitor or whether you're a professional. They always gave you these cards where you got hit with something like that. And the question is, would you put your surplus towards retiring the debt, or would you see the bigger picture and try and leverage into the assets and grow the base? Yep. So it's kind of that sort of question.
It's 100% that question. That's exactly what it is. And it is going to come down to case by case. Now, you've told us what your discretionary income is, Ian, so that tells me that you've got really strong income. So one way, and if we didn't have a lot of equity where we could consolidate and refinance that equity into personal debt against your mortgage, we may actually also be in a position where we can get a personal loan. Consolidate that into a personal loan, say paying 5%, as opposed to the credit card interest, where you might be paying 18 or 19. Now that also said is, if you can roll them into an interest-free credit card, that's a different story. So that's where, it's case by case. But fundamentally, if we've got enough surplus income where we can comfortably manage that debt, keep a little bit of an emergency fund and invest, we would invest every day of the week. And that's exactly what we do to our clients. And that's why doing sophisticated cash flow models is the critical part of the problem solving we do in our business.
And it all comes down to the L word, leverage, because you can get a return on a larger asset if you can buy a property. So, Ben, we're going to have a crack at this one. We're getting close to time, but we set a mission to get these ones done. I think we're pretty close. So,
sounds good.
Paul, Celia, hey guys, love the podcast and your book. Great help for us noobs. I've just started my journey into the world of property investing. After listening to you guys, plus reading your book, I've taken my first step and started meeting with mortgage brokers to get an understanding of where I stand financially.
Sweet.
One of them was actually part of your team.
Oh,
he was great and very professional. My question to you guys is, once I have my finances ready to go, do I need to be looking to meet with a property advisor or a buyer's agent next? Your advice on this would be great. Keep up the great work, Paul.
So the answer to that depends on whether you want to be a DIY investor or whether you want to actually get some professional advice. So the reality is that you do need to have a team of people around you, and that minimum team you need to have is that finance advisor and the accountant, and then your choice is whether you want to leverage from the knowledge of a skilled practitioner to basically build you your plan. If you think that you can build your own plan out, then what are you building that knowledge on? What resources, what experience are you drawing to build that plan out? So if the answer to that is, and in most cases, you've got to have an honest assessment to yourself. And, by listening to this podcast, you might be sort of saying, well, I thought I knew a bit, but now listening to what you guys are doing and reading more, I'm actually more overwhelmed by the technicalities that go into making for great investing. So you might then seek out an investment advisor. If you're doing that, the first one to see is a property investment advisor. So a property investment advisor's job should be around building the plan. So looking at the strategy, looking at the cash flows, tailoring it to your personal and financial goals. So they're always working in your best interest, not a spruiker who's trying to sell you a stock off a stock list or trying to push a property your way with no well-rounded needs and meeting your personal circumstances. So they should be, ideally fee for service, and they should basically outline and articulate what they're going to try and do for you and the outcomes you're trying to achieve. And if they can get that done, then you know exactly what you're getting for your money. And then ultimately the implementation side is normally best done through a great buyer's agent who is investment savvy.
So it's really a question of, should they come and meet you first or should they come and meet me first? So people might be surprised by my answer, Ivis, but I think they should definitely come and meet you first, because I get this question weekly, daily, as to, aren't you just going to buy me the property price and you've got that in mind? And the analogy is really quite simple. If I had if a client had a block of land and they wanted to build a house on it, they could go and find the award-winning master builder in that area who would build them just with the best craftsmanship, the best workmanship through that house. And at the end of the process, they would have a beautiful house that looked amazing. But what if they had because the builder's going to go order the timber, they're going to order all the materials, and they're going to do the best job they possibly can. But what if, before the builder actually did that, what if they went to an architect, and what if they went to a project manager first and said, I've got this block that's got a north orientation and I've got the aspect looking towards the city, because the builder might not take that into account and just build you a really great property.
Yep.
But if we did it to a master plan, which the architect would put in place and they'd plan it beforehand, the builder would then just take that set of plans and then implement it. And that is the analogy that I have to say each and every day to people who ring in and want to talk to us, because we will build the property to what we think is elite craftsmanship, to what we think is elite workmanship. But if you just leave it to us, we'll lick our finger, put it up in the wind and go, we think you should buy this because it's just our opinion. Whereas if I go to your team and I say, mate, what price point should I be in? What capital growth history do I need it to be? What rental yield do I need it to be? And what sort of risk profile do these guys have? So I can take all of that into account when I buy. I am absolutely rock solid on what I'm buying. I have no hesitation in what they need, and I have enormous confidence that they're on the right path. So same outcome, I can still, without the plan, I can still make sure they get a first-class investment property that's investment grade, that applies all the filters we've talked about for the last 81 episodes. However, I always ask the first question, why bother? What's the big picture? Why are you doing this? Because that's what I'm most interested in, because I'm most interested in helping people create a lifestyle. I'm not interested in helping them accumulate bricks and mortar. That's just our vehicle. So without a shadow of a doubt for this question, Paul, I think you should go to a qualified property investment advisor first, not the buyer's agent.
Well, I think you've wrapped it up beautifully. I could use another analogy around sporting and coaches and playing the long game. I mean, property investment is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So you want to make sure that you're you're lining those ducks up in a row nicely. And I think a good property investment advisor will want to be thinking long term and then bringing it down and breaking it down into bite-sized pieces so it's achievable for you. And those bite-sized pieces are our BCD. It's basically borrowing, cash flow management, borrowing power, asset selection and defence is effectively what we do.
And you take yourself out of the susceptibility of human nature to go towards their own incentive. Because if you go to a buyer's agent first and you live in Sydney and you ask them where they should buy, they'll say Sydney. Whereas if you go to a property investment advisor and say, where should I buy next? They'll say, I need you to buy a 600,000 asset that's got 7% historical growth and it's getting 3.5% yield.
Yeah, I don't know yet. That's right. Don't know where that is.
You're not bound by geography, whereas the buyer's agent generally is. So let the human incentive work to your favour by going to the advisor who's talking about the end outcome rather than the buyer's agent who's talking about the bricks and mortar.
Great wrap
Very, very good questions, folks. Very good questions, as Ivers points to the clock and suggests that we are over time, but we are always over time.
We just love chatting.
We just love chatting, mate. Remember the early days? We used to get anal about 20 minutes. Now look at us. We're freestyling.
I just get wrapped up early. I wanted to keep talking.
Very good. So, your arms crossed. You're too busy daydreaming.
Oh, no, I've got to do something here, don't I?
So, signing off.
What are we going to sign off on?
Do you remember where you signed off last week?
Punjabi.
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 We're going to India.
Oh, we're going to India. Punjabi.
Uh-oh.
Well, this could be. This is an attempt at humour.
Apologies in advance.
Sati Riki Akulkle Miladni.
That sounded, for the first time, it didn't sound French.
No, it's very much Indian.
I was just waxed you over
wait, that's what's wrong with that. I'm trying to do the Indian language. Punjabi. Rab Rakaha. That's may God protect you.
Oh, that's a good one.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Sati Shri Akaruna.
You're going to go through them all later?
That was it. So, Punjabi,
folks. Rab Raka, may God protect you. Until next week.
Rab Raka.